wanted to touch base, and
You just want to
I have a couple of things
Make
that,
sure we're all still alive.
I'm sorry?
Make sure
Yeah.
we're all still alive.
Exactly. And also, just report on a couple of things. And I think Ethel, if she joins us, she wasn't feeling well about an hour ago, but if she joins us, she has some ideas. And we may want to touch on all those things. In no particular order, our draft letter on open restaurants
I'm not getting any.
never went anywhere because it was never commented on by the BCI committee, and I'm not sure about transportation. And so the question is whether we want to sort of either nudge Stephen to get it reviewed by the other committees, or alternatively send it as members of one committee to the elected officials. But I feel strongly, and we can discuss it, that we really should not be very passive in this area because it's an important issue. And regardless of how you feel about open restaurants, our letter addressed the procedures, and that's going to be voted on soon, I think, by City Council if it hasn't already. So that's one thing.
Richard, in the meantime, the city's plans really changed a lot from what they had been, with now no sheds and different forms of sidewalk or street restaurants. Is what we wrote at that time still really, I know it was a lot of generalities and a lot of concern about the process, but is it still really good in light of the really pretty substantial changes that the city seems to have made in its direction?
We didn't address any of the specific proposals.
Right.
So, it's good to see that they've made changes, but we haven't addressed it. And I'm not sure, I think that really does require more than one committee to get on.
I have no sound.
Ethel? I can hear you.
Where is she?
If she has no sound, then she can't know that you heard her.
But if there have been changes, we should adjust the letter. And I think that Community Board 7 must comment on this.
All right. Well, if everybody agrees, I'll take it up with Steve tomorrow, see what his.
I don't think that BCI liked the letter at all. I think they didn't want to sign on to it.
Well, let's find out. And let's, then the question is, if nobody else wants to sign off on it, do we have the authority as a committee to send something to the elected officials or as individuals?
I strongly feel this is a land use issue.
Yep.
Everything of how the restaurants will be is something afterwards. But the first thing is, how are they going to use the streets of New York City, the land?
Right.
Yep.
I agree.
Well, all right. I'll talk to Steve, and I'll circle back. And if we all agree, if Steve doesn't throw up any roadblocks, we'll send it as a committee or as individuals.
There's also a 3-part in terms of, it's no longer just a shelter where you can bring your outdoor food and eat. There's lighting now. People are putting windows in. Some of them on more fancy streets are using sash windows. They're now really habitable elements in the street. And Absolutely. The question is, how are we going to regulate that?
Paige, isn't what it's really been a couple of months ago now, but I thought what the city had now announced was structures like that were not going to be part of the plan, and it was going to be umbrellas and things like that. So I'm not sure that this increasing construction and relative permanence of these sheds is still relevant. I may have missed something in the news.
I don't know. They seem to be getting more sophisticated. in terms of their appearance and amenity. Maybe it's because of winter, but the first time, I think it's in the 60s, between Central Park West and Columbus, there's one that has sash windows in it, with an air conditioning unit on the top.
Better watch out. It might become a landmark.
Exactly. You know, and it's pretty. I mean, it doesn't look bad, but again, is that the use of our streets? I agree with you guys.
That actually, Paige, that brings me to our the second item that I wanted to just mention. And I don't think I don't think it's up to us to do anything. You know, the West Park application to decertify the church has been filed. And for some ungodly reason, I read all 256 pages of it.
Right.
And, you know, I just urge everybody else to do that, because there's going to be a public hearing on May 5th. And we may want to take a position as a committee, or we may not. It's not really a land use issue.
No, it's a preservation issue, Richard, and the preservation committee that I'm on, as is Peter and as is Paige. My understanding is that committee has a meeting on it on May 5th.
Yeah.
On that issue.
I think it's a public hearing, though.
But they're running it, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
so I don't think that we need to do anything as a committee. It's not the proposed replacement building is an as-of-right building. It's a 17-story structure. Looks like it fits in where the church is. So really, the only issues, I think, are landmark issues.
Well,
Paige, do you agree?
No, not really, because there are three buildings that are involved. One is the Belnord. They have their citizens or residents committee. Then there's Susan Sullivan, who's in the building on 86th Street. And then there's Mitch Shanroth, who runs the Owners Association on 87th Street. And the issue is going to be a big one, because the inner faces of that block that surrounds the church are habitable rooms. And that is going to ire any owner, because I think now they're co-ops or condos, the value of their properties, and they're getting galvanized. I don't know how, but I just hear it, because I like Kirsch Bakery for coffee and stuff in the mornings. And I hear the gossip from him, because a lot of people are very upset. And it's starting to make ripples of some of the lesser quality buildings on 86th Street from Central Park West to Riverside, of targeting the underdeveloped buildings that may go to build bigger and bigger buildings. So it's one of these, what do you call it? Creep, scope creep and land use creep. So
Paige, if the building is as of right, which they claim it is, how, in what way does it interfere with existing windows?
because they're going to be blocking up the lot line windows.
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
not their problem. That's
Right.
the problem of the,
No, but it's right now, the configuration of the church is such that it doesn't block any windows. So the issue will be when they build, if they build, it will change the economic portfolio of two major buildings.
Paige, lot line windows are not legal. Remember what happened with Trump's building on 72nd Street? And
Yes,
it went to court and they built right up next to.
I know that, but people buy building, they buy apartments because they think that a church or a synagogue or a school isn't going to change. And so people are upset that suddenly it will get filled in. It may be perfectly legal, but I bet you dinner and a movie, they're going to put up one hell of a fight, both of those buildings.
Okay, they may, but it's a risk that you take when you have lot line windows.
Well, it's an interesting question, Louisa. I don't know the answer to or even how to address it, but if there's if those, the building is as a right only if the landmark decertification goes through.
Correct.
And the part of the decertification application includes a rendering of this new building. And it may be that it's a ground for not decertifying, that the replacement building will adversely affect the neighboring buildings. I don't know the answer to that, but it's a fair question. But
I don't know the answer either. I do know that the neighborhood around the church is galvanizing their positions.
Good.
Valerie Campbell at Kramer Levin has called me out of courtesy, and they're proceeding with their recommendation. But the problem is the church lease is not due until January 1 of 2023. So we have people feel that they have enough time to mount opposition and whatever they're going to do.
when you say the church lease, what do you?
The church lease, the building is currently leased to whatever the organization is from the presbytery. It's owned by the presbytery, and the lease runs out on December 31, 2022. So after that, and it's highly unlikely that they're going to get a renewal. I haven't heard any musings on that.
If I can just interrupt, they have 12 known members and no minister.
Right.
So the presbytery apparently has no interest in building it up, keeping it up.
Well, at least they have a minion.
Well, the other irony is everybody says that they're creating a space, 10,000 square feet in the new building for the church to continue. And Shelley is absolutely right. It's the emperor's new clothes all over again. And I don't, it's very difficult to follow, to be honest.
But Richard, I think what you said in the first place is correct. It's not a matter for this committee. The Preservation Committee's on it.
I mean, I think if the issue of the lot line windows is raised, we may want to look into it. But other than that, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about the underlying landmarking issue, but it's not for our committee to weigh in on it, I don't think.
Doesn't it have to go to LPC to de-landmark it first?
Yes.
Of course.
There's an application that was filed earlier this month to decertify the landmark status.
And they have
it's
Preservation Committee at CB7 as part of the process.
Yeah, we're on it.
exactly.
But doesn't it also have to go up to Albany to decertify?
No.
No, it
I
goes
think that
through the
was true of
presbytery.
that was true of the Museum of Natural History because it was state.
Oh, that's because it was parks.
Yeah.
Right. This
But
has
it's
to
not,
go through the presbytery,
This
ultimately.
This is just LPC, and there's apparently an appeals panel that's part of the LPC. I'm not sure exactly what the procedure is.
I know members of the Presbytery Board who feel there are too many Presbyterian churches on the west side. I think there are 5, and they like to reduce that number.
How often is something a landmark decertified?
I heard, and don't hold me to it because I don't know where I heard it, but that in history there have been 19 applications, of which 15 have been granted.
Oh.
And interestingly, the test appears to be whether the applicant can make a reasonable return. It's sort of like the same thing for the, the church in its application has taken the position that standard applies to it, and they have gotten several assessments as to what it would cost to fix the place up, and what the expected rent income would be, and they show that they would be operating at a loss. My review of it was that somebody should look at the estimates and decide which of the work that's being requested is necessary to come into code and which is cosmetic or unnecessary or a wish list. But that's not our brief for this committee.
Well,
May I-
FYI, just so you know, the my firm did 2 cost estimates for 3 different developers who were interested in adaptive reuse. Arup Engineers has looked at it. Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager have looked at it. Ambrosino, DePinto, and Schmieder, mechanical engineers, have looked at it, and no one can get to the numbers that the Presbytery is claiming is needed to restore the building.
That was my impression. It just seemed to me that there was a lot of interior work that actually may improve the interior space, but is not necessary. There are some things. Like apparently on the south wall, the wall has lost contact with the roof joists. And
Only in 2 places at the apex where the gable ends meet. And
Yep.
one was recently repaired, and that was the one over the Idlets building, which is really the most charming of the 2 buildings that were stitched together. But the problem I have with this is that this is when people get tired of a landmark or it gets expensive, it's thrown away. And no one else does that. Look at Brooklyn. There are many, many beautiful churches that have been adapted into apartments, restaurants, dance halls, schools, all sorts of things. So I just don't think the people that are reviewing this have their thinking cap on.
Okay. Anyhow, it's not our issue at the moment.
I'm sorry, I have trouble with
Ethel
the-
is participating via my cell
No,
phone.
I'm not now. Can
Okay.
you hear me regularly? Because now I can hear all of you.
All right, I'll get off the phone.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
As far as I know, and I read some of this and I saw some of the estimates page that you received, from various contractors.
Mhm.
As far as I know the history, and up to now, the presbytery and the church was very much against the designation in the 2000s. Before that, there were the ministers at the church who were in there expressed their views. I'm just recapping what I know, at least 10 years before, stating that the job is not to save buildings, so they appreciate that their mission is the religious and social one. And over the years, as I looked at the material, and I remember going to the church and asking the ministers, is there any way to get the money or to save this? And in any case, the presbytery has expressed its views in the last years and claims it has no money because the cost is so great. This can be disputed, but it has said that, and so it is at least, I think, please Paige, if I don't have every fact, that it is at least 15 or 20 years of a great deal of repair and some basic repairs and maintenance, and the church and the presbytery has not sought support either from their own sources or elsewhere. So it's a very difficult situation, and more so in the last years that there is almost no service there or any going church operating. Now, what is operating there, as you know, is theater groups and arts groups, and they've amalgamated into this, calling it the center. And they get some fees from different groups, and they use small offices at the top, and they spent the money to put up some of the scaffolding because they were having people come to see some of the plays and to walk up 3 flights, and there was tremendous danger that part of the building or anything could fall on the sidewalk. So the claim, at least as I've read it, is that these arts groups have paid for the scaffold because they fear if they have any audiences and danger could occur. So at least to me, as I valued the church and over many, many years and worked there with the ministers years ago a lot, it's a very, very unusually difficult situation in that the church, the presbytery, seems to have little or no interest in attempting to raise any money, either from benefactors or anything, to make a deal. Now, it would be good to hear some of that, but it seems a big nothing, a big no from them. This doesn't mean that I think this great deal is something we should all back, but it's a very significant, great dilemma in this instance.
Okay.
Can I just,
let's yeah, Paige. Okay, but then we want to move on because we're really not.
Oh, I know, but let me just put some other things in perspective. The
Sure.
theater use for that building goes way back to Shakespeare in the Park. Joe Papp started his theater in the balcony of that space.
Very aware.
The Muppets started in that space, believe it or not, when Jim Henson was looking at whatever. There is a cultural history. I think the problem is that land value, the church is worth more demolished at 60 million or whatever the press said, I think that was the number, than the actual purchase price for someone to adapt and reuse it. And that's really the difficult factor. Who is the appropriate person who could turn it around and still have some, because the idlets component of that is charming. It's small, and a small religious entity could take that over. So the problem is, if this goes, do other churches around the 5 boroughs go too? And that's the Partners for Sacred Places, all sorts of people are looking at this from different aspects of what the future holds for redundant churches.
I think ultimately it's going to come down to a battle of the experts as to what it would cost to get this thing up to code. If it's $50 million, I can see somebody saying, it's not, we can't expect the church to pay that. If it's $20 million that can be borrowed and amortized, that's a different story. But anyhow, that's not our problem tonight, and maybe not ever. If an issue does arise about the new building, we will weigh in. Is that
right?
All right.
That's all we could ask. Thank you.
Now, I think Ethel had some ideas about some projects. You want to?
Well, I will say a few things. There's nothing new here, but with respect, knowing we are the land use committee, and for example, I start with an interest and concern as a longtime community board member, but probably more so as a planner who looks at, as so many of you do, and I think there are 3 or 4 or 5 planners and architects here, so I speak with deference. And that is that we have just in the pandemic, obviously experienced great transformations, often improvised in the streets, and in, of course, the use and expansion of open dining and restaurant dining. And I imagine, if I may say, that an outdoor, cafe culture and restaurants is something that we think, maybe is a wonderful thing. And we certainly have recognized restaurants in this terrible time. But the drawbacks, well, maybe that's a bad word, but I'm just saying, as I look at this and I see, and we in this committee, I'm not maybe accurate enough, but we were asked, to speak on certain zoning changes, and we really had questions about it because of the end and rather ending of important community participation and advocacy at the early stages. At the same time, now we see that there have been some suits about the zoning and some questions about it. And I believe that this committee, please correct me, Richard, did write, and I think it was unanimous in our vote, did write with a number of criticisms to be sent, that we're not against outdoor dining, but we did write a letter of criticism, which either never got to the powers that be, or maybe it didn't get to the full board. But
Well, we had a resolution, Ethel.
Right. Yes,
and
please.
The resolution addressed the timing and it involved our complaint that they were amending the zoning resolution before there was anything in place to replace it, and before we knew what DOT or some other agency was going to recommend. We never addressed the specifics of any proposal because there were none.
Right. And at the same time, there are other community boards that have been questioning this. But in any case, I think that we all can see, as there are city plans soon, in fact, they've been advertising them, to expand the use of cafes and so on. And I begin to raise, and many of you already have, that we may be in favor, but the drawbacks, the questions are, among other things, a shoddy construction with flapping panels to keep out the wind, structures that get in the way of a local transportation, buses that are in conflict often with other means of public circulation, such as bike lanes and other means. We've been having battles about motorbikes, and should they be, and what should occur with them, dining that straddles bike lanes, tables that interfere with pedestrian traffic, restaurants that colonize more free public space than maybe they're entitled to. And then there are other questions about, and I'm a little random here, so this isn't, I'm trying to puzzle out, actually, as I have experienced, as you all have, a scene that we like, but that really has major questions about what in the world are we doing with our public space. Among them, even now, and please, I'm not singling out any organization, but I just read the proposal from the Columbus Avenue bid, which I think is being accepted, of, I forget now, in the 60s and 70s, for the closing, I think on Saturday and Sunday, of Columbus Avenue, of the streets to traffic. And many of us, I guess, would be glad to see some of that and of automobiles. But and this is a bid, I mean, and I'm not against them, but there also, and this is a larger question, there's going to be closed, or there will be great diversions of buses and people.
Ethel, forgive me in a nutshell, What are you
Yeah, what
proposing?
my thought is,
Yeah.
and it goes with something else, and with another point, it seems to me that we in land use, and indeed perhaps with another committee, should consider studying, obtaining information about and in certain areas on the following kinds of questions. To be looking at, for example, taking a 10, 12, 14 block area, which again, at the beginning of the pandemic, this committee discussed and tried to develop a study on what was happening with storefronts, the retail, and all of that. And for us to study that 15 blocks as a community board and then understand what is there and to make recommendations for perhaps other kinds of retail that may occur, that we need, that the vacant stores and the restaurants may be interfering and blocking the possibility of the uses of storefronts for other kinds of things.
So the first step you're proposing is a survey, block by block.
I think that there's a lot that we, the people who live and work here and care so much about it, that we don't have together a better understanding of what's going on, what is happening, what is working, what isn't. Take a 15 block area. I mean, I've heard anecdotally, and I respect those anecdotes from, for example, the upper, Manhattan Valley, Columbus Avenue. And I have heard, oh, our restaurants are working so well, they're so well behaved, and it's giving new life. Great. I want to know what has been, what are there changes that we should make? What is the relationship between the buildings there? What kinds of buildings? And look at it in relation to these other, the public spaces, and do it in a way in which we all get some information together and then say, okay, what's working? What can we help? What do we need to do? And what is the connection perhaps of some areas that have changed and that we could learn about to other questions of land use in our area? That's
all that's good.
Okay.
We need to start at step one. We have to figure out what step one is. Peter, did you have your hand up?
No, just,
Oh, sorry.
I think this was enough. I think we should go on.
All right, well, look, Ethel, let's develop your ideas, see if we can come up with an action plan, and then I'll poll the committee to see who's interested in working on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe nobody is.
Maybe. Shelley? Unmute.
Along with this, people don't know what's in our community.
Right.
Okay. How many SROs are there? What are they being used for? What are other uses of buildings that are empty now? What could they be? What they could be used for? Right. And I think that it's sad, but every time things come up, people make generalizations that I know are not true because I know some of it. But to be honest, I couldn't identify, half of the buildings and what they were used for, what they are used for, what they could be used for. And I think that would be a good study in itself.
Yep.
I agree.
Roberta and then Louisa.
I agree. We have a few other problems, and one of them is the thing with the subways, that if you're near a subway and you do certain things for the subway, you can build higher. The 421A, which is problematic because we're not getting enough. If you look at the data, which the Budget and Strategy Committee has been doing, we're losing. We're getting very wealthy people coming into the community because those are the new apartments, and we're losing minority. We're losing housing for people that work in the community who can't live here. The other thing is there's a whole bunch of programs, sorry about the noise. There's a whole bunch of programs about air rights. And we should be looking at some of those because, for example, Project Find is able to sell some air rights which is a good thing, in order to convert one of their buildings into permanent affordable housing, and they get enough money that they can take an SRO building and convert the apartment into a studio apartment with a bathroom and kitchen facilities, and make it permanent, which is a good thing because it maintains affordable housing over a 100-year period. So I think those are some areas that we could start looking at, especially anything that's tied to the air rights.
I think those are all good topics. Louisa?
Okay, let me just ask, the Project Find, are you referring to the building on 79th Street? Roberta?
No, actually, the one on 79th Street is under a different program, but I believe it's either Hargrove House or Hamilton. I always get the two confused. One is on 71st and one is on 73rd. And they were able to sell all rights from that building and convert those units into permanent affordable housing that needed to be upgraded. So
I think
they had
that's Hamilton and it's on 73rd Street.
73rd.
Okay.
and so they were able to convert that building into usable, upgraded with, so that it was a nice apartment for somebody with a workable bathroom with, a kitchen.
No, I understand.
Can I just interrupt,
Second.
Louisa? That the air rights went to 103rd Street,
Right.
adding one floor to the Toll Brothers building where the Marrakech was on the corner.
I'm sorry, one moment. Air rights on 73rd Street went to 103rd and it wasn't a house of worship or anything?
No,
Were they air rights, Shelley?
That's not possible.
Shelley, were they air rights or were they affordable housing bonus?
Richard, can I explain? The air rights, so the deal is they can sell air rights as long as it's in the CD. So it's as long as it's in Community District 7, they can sell the air rights. And because Project Find is a really good organization, instead of selling it to some fancy developer, they did what Shelley said.
That's incorrect.
This is in the zoning resolution?
No, I'm sorry. There is on this one, if I may interrupt in this respect, the Toll Brothers building at 103rd, am I correct?
103rd and Broadway.
Thank you. Is the first building in the last zoning that Community Board 7, in an extremely community-based, coordinated, very hard effort that Community Board 7 still can be proud of. It was never perfect, but boy, it was good, which was to do a rezoning north of 96th Street to 110th, which was, I think, 2003 or 4. And among other things, all of us were extremely interested in saving the mid-blocks and to down zone to 8B, which we succeeded in doing. But as to Broadway and the Project Find and the Toll Brothers, we fought to have a lower zoning on Broadway than city planning wanted. City planning always wanted 10 or 10A because that's what there was below.
This is the R9 zoning, right?
Exactly. So what happened?
R9A.
R9A.
Inclusionary.
I'm still not sure, on Roberta's point, I'm still not sure how air rights.
But it's not air rights.
I don't think it is either.
It's not air rights. Can I tell you what has happened? It's the first and only instance under the new zoning and under 9A, which has in the zoning resolution, voluntary inclusionary. And at the site of 103rd Street, where that hotel was and Toll Brothers, that they made a deal to subsidize and to provide money as part of it to Project Find, because you could have, because in that proposal, it's not only to build on site, but you can provide that the giving site, gets more, bigger for.
Ethel is correct. Ethel is correct. The point is that there was a deal made. It's not just in that R9 district, but I don't know what that is. Okay, what it is that in R10, R9 and R10 districts, you could, as long as you provide low affordable housing off-site within the community district,
Correct.
you can get your bonus. It doesn't have anything to do with, land rights
Correct.
transfer.
Complete
Right, okay.
no.
That makes me feel better.
I'm sorry, there
Because
is
we wrote it.
there
Yeah.
is a program,
Yeah.
that's one process, but there is a program called Sarah. And
SARA.
I think it's SARA. And
Right.
Project Find has used it. And they have, I don't know who they sold their air rights to, so it may be a different deal with Toll. But they did say, I work with David and Mark from Project Find, and I'll ask them tomorrow about it, but they did sell air rights. It's a special program where they're allowed to sell air rights within the CD to a developer, in return for which the money they use can be used for not only developing a building that they own, but they can then purchase an additional building. The
Okay.
building
I'd be very
Well, look,
interested to find out how they did that.
The details of this are, for tonight's purposes, are not important.
Yeah, I want to talk about something
issue
different, if I
really-
may.
Yeah, but just a second.
It's just
The
an
issue
accurate.
really is, that Roberta is raising, is that there are techniques for increasing affordable
Yes.
housing, and
Yes,
it's something we ought to look into.
yes.
Now, Louisa.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, boy, was that a digression. Okay, a lot of people know about the study on SROs that was done in 2009 and 2010. It was done for Gail when she was first borough president. This is something that Larry Wood referenced again at the housing meeting. And the point is that everyone talks about, and I've now seen it, and it's fantastic, but it has to obviously be updated. It's more than 10 years old. We have had access before this to interns from the city, fund for the city of New York. Now, I've been in contact with them. We're too late for this past year, but we could start now. We could get an intern. This would be a graduate student, because what we are talking about and what Ethel is talking about in terms of a study is something that has to be fairly professional. It has to be someone who could spend a lot of time, do a lot of research on computer, go out and walk the streets. And so what I would like to do is a combination of housing and land use, that we make an application to fund for the city of New York. They would welcome us. They wonder why we dropped off the last 2 years, and have them come in, and they would be coming in the fall. We have to do it quickly, and have them revive this study that was done on SROs, and we can expand it somewhat, but definitely to update the information on SROs, because as Ethel said, we have to know what's out there.
Absolutely. And Louisa and everyone, we could try very quickly to see if Pratt or possibly Columbia can have such a project. I had been teaching there forever since 2021, but I'm not there at the moment. Otherwise, I would have tried to organize a studio, but we can try that quickly if it's not late. And at Pratt as well, to ask for a project along the lines that you said, focused, and to get that kind of information, which is extremely important in this neighborhood, and which we should update and get to know. We can try quickly, and I'll be glad to help.
All right, look, why don't we do this? Louisa is your chair of housing, and Ethel and I will put our heads together, try to figure out a strategy to get an intern, and then figure out what we want the intern to do, or maybe figure out what we want the intern to do first, and then
Right.
how we get it. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, the horse before the cart.
Okay, I don't have anything else on my agenda. Does anyone else have any issues? Louisa and Paige.
Paige. We don't even look like.
You hands up, Louisa. Are you?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
All right.
Two newsy bits. In terms of, you just reminded me, Louisa and Ethel, air rights. Kay Carpin was interviewed in a local rag and was talking about the sale of his air rights to be transferred somewhere. And there's another church on 79th Street and Broadway that has also been approaching people. So just keep your eyes and ears peeled for where these things might land. And the second thing is our executive director, Sean Corsandi, was interviewed today on WBAI by Michael Haskins at 11 a.m. And the purpose was to do a deep dive of the details of the Barnett building that's going up on 66th Street. And it was really very succinct. So if you want to know anything about what's happening in the southern part of our district, go to BAI.com, I think, and it was at 11 o'clock today. It's about 18 minutes, I think, of the interview. And it's really, it's very succinct. It talks about all the issues that these types of buildings are creating for the neighborhood. So that's my news. Thank you.
Very good.
A link on the Landmark West.
Sorry?
I think there will be a link on the Landmark West website as well.
Yes, you could do that too, but you can also go directly to BAI at 11 o'clock today and you'll see it. There's a bit of news beforehand, but it's very succinct, and he asked him about 5 questions. And it's a great primer for students to understand the process of how buildings change. So it was really good.
Right.
All right. Well,
I just want to ask one question, if I might, and the people here may have the answer. I was under the impression that when they built the building on Broadway between 86th and 87th on the west side of the street, that they used the landmarks from St. Paul, the landmark rights. They bought the landmark rights, their rights from St. Paul and St. Andrew. Am I incorrect on that?
You mean West End Avenue?
No, the building that's on Broadway, the big, huge residential building on Broadway between 86th and 87th on the west side of the street.
The boulevard.
I'm pretty sure you're right
Whatever
about
it's
that,
called.
Louisa. I seem to remember that was the case, that we had a big fight about it.
Right, in which
Richard,
case there aren't any air rights left on St. Paul and St. Andrew, or if they are, they're very small.
Well, just check your Google the St. Paul and St. Andrews. It was in one of the neighborhood newspapers, and he was interviewed for that. So I don't know.
I actually saw it, and I was going to ask him where he got his information from, because it was a while ago.
Yeah, but the building on West 86th Street between 86th and 87th on that side of, well, on the east side is the Belnord. So
right.
I don't know, that confuses me.
I don't think
How
that
do
the
you-
boulevard, the
how do you-
boulevard was a housing quality building and used other legislation to get somewhat more bulk and so on that was legal at the time, I believe. So I'm not sure about that. Secondly, worthy of a little research, it seems to me, and if the, let's say, colleague Kay Carpin is working to sell air rights that are available as a landmark from his building, I just have the question as I walked there and I kind of looked around, and people who know landmarks may really know this better. I just thought, wait a minute, where will these, however much there is, where will they land? Because as I quickly looked, it wasn't, systematic, up and down West End Avenue, page, when I was thinking about that, what's adjacent, a quick study in each direction, I kept seeing these 15-story, 16-story West End Avenue type building. I thought, whoa, where is it going to land? Then I know that with landmarks, and wanted to know, the big thing with landmarks is that you could transfer, the landmark can transfer across the street or elsewhere, as has occurred in a number of places. Again, someone was telling me this, that's why I want to do the quick study, is what are we talking about? How far across the street and where? Because there is, I think, a parameter within a landmark being able to transfer across the street. It's not
Right.
forever. So that
Right.
means
Lisa,
Ethel,
Lisa,
okay.
and
Excuse
then
me.
Rebecca.
Okay, what you can do is it's adjacent or it's diagonally across the street,
Correct.
and it will go to the lot.
exactly.
So if the
Except
lot is
for
100 by 100, on the corner, it will go to that lot. But
Got
if
it.
you look at it,
Churches and synagogues churches and house of worship can go much further. So they're
No.
exempt.
Know that is not in the law,
that's not true, Roberta.
and it's absolutely inaccurate.
The thing is that they can go diagonal across the street. None of the others can go across the street.
Exactly, and that's cited, and Louisa is correct, and Roberta, I'm afraid that is absolutely not accurate.
Well, Roberta's right that the churches and synagogues have privileges that other
Yes.
institutions don't have, but they
That's
only
no.
extend to
Right.
diagonally across the street
But they go all the way up to heaven.
Right.
or down, depending on your perspective.
Not if they're in a contextual district.
All right, we're now getting a little giddy, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't
Second.
move.
And I'll follow up. I'll send everybody a list of ideas and follow up. And Ethel and Louisa, let's figure out a time to talk.
Okay, good.
All right?
Everyone
Excellent.
stay well.
Everybody have a
Thanks.
nice month. See you again in a month or less.
Take care.
care.